I want to go over to Capitol Hill now and bring in Nikole Killion and Scott MacFarlane. Nikole and Scott are both CBS News congressional correspondents. Thank you both for being here. As always, we appreciate it. Nikole, I want to start with you because I'm so curious. What has the reaction on Capitol Hill been to this FBI search of Mar-a-Lago?
Well, it really has come down strictly on party lines, which is no surprise here on Capitol Hill. Although one thing that's been kind of interesting to watch in terms of some Democratic leaders, they've actually kind of been a little coy and to talk about this, whether it's Speaker Nancy Pelosi or Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. They both have kind of shied away from really talking much about it, saying they don't really know much. They've only heard or seen, the developments on TV, so really not weighing in with a full-throated response as we've seen them done on other issues, for instance, involving the former president and even Mitch McConnell as well. The Republican minority leader, top Republican minority leader in the Senate, was asked about this today and didn't take the bait, didn't respond, saying that he was just there to talk about the issues of the day in terms of his state and some of that flooding in Kentucky. But that being said, we have seen some pretty strong reaction, particularly among House Republicans, most notably Kevin McCarthy, the House GOP leader, who in essence has suggested that, when Republicans take control of Congress, if they take control of Congress, later this year, that certainly come next year, this is an area where they expect more oversight, so much so that the minority leader putting the Attorney General on notice by saying, preserve your documents and clear your calendar. So there has been a stronger response, as I said, more among some of these House Republicans. Lee Stefanik, for instance, who is the chair of the House GOP conference, calling this a dark day. We've also seen Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee kind of refer to this as like a third world order, if you will, and really bashing this probe. And we've seen other Republicans coming out saying that they do want FBI Director Wray, as well as the Attorney General, to go on record and to say more about what happened here. So, it has been, like I said, kind of mixed reaction here on the Hill as we all await more developments as to exactly what happened and the reason and rationale behind this search at the former president's Florida home.
Yeah, interesting to see the distinction between Senate Republicans and House Republicans. Scott, I think a lot of people have questions about what this search warrant actually says. Is it uncommon for us not to see a copy of the search warrant in these types of cases?
Hey, Caitlin, this is how it normally plays out. Search warrants signed by a federal judge that trigger the execution of a search on somebody's property, their land, or their personal property. These are typically sealed when they're being executed. In fact, search warrants often remain sealed until or unless there's a case filed, a civil or a criminal case. So this is actually quite customary. Those who have some experience with the criminal justice system are accustomed to hearing about search warrants, but not seeing them. A lot of people want to see what's in this search warrant. There's no guarantee it's ever released. If there's no case filed, those things remain in the ether. The bigger question is, where did this search warrant come from? Did it come from a federal prosecution or a grand jury here in the District of Columbia, where there's a sitting grand jury that is investigating the 2020 election? Did it come from the state of Maryland, where a lot of National Archives-related investigations are launched? Did it come from Florida? That's going to be very relevant if there is a case filed. Where is the case filed? Where is a prospective jury for whoever is being targeted by a search warrant? This is how things typically play out. But there's a larger question. Nikole touched on this. There is this pressure in Congress, if not among the supporters of former President Trump, for answers. Why was his property searched? Why was such a provocative action taken? The Justice Department will be under some pressure, uncommon pressure, to explain itself and perhaps break its custom of not commenting on investigations unless or until a case is filed. That's going to be the growing reality for the Justice Department as days go by after this search.
And Scott, I mean, there are so many investigations going on, lots of prosecutions going on. One big question I had was whether any of this, the search warrant, could have any kind of implication for those January 6th prosecutions. I mean, I know this is reportedly not related to that, but could it have some kind of impact?
Everything involving Donald Trump has some potential impact on the January 6 prosecutions. Let me reset where things are. Two separate investigations, both unprecedented in size. The January 6 Select Committee, the legislative investigation, which has said in so many words, the investigation has led the committee members to believe Donald Trump was part of a conspiracy to defraud the United States. Then there's that Justice Department criminal investigation of January 6th, with now more than an estimated 860 federal defendants. Not one of those cases has named Donald Trump or the Trump inner circle as some component of the crime or some type of co-defendant or co-conspirator. Former President Trump has not been a party to those cases filed right now. But those defendants, especially the high-level defendants, the ones accused of seditious conspiracy or conspiring to obstruct an official proceeding, they are by the dozens being held in pretrial detention. And one of the things judges have leaned into when they order those defendants in pretrial detention is that they believe those defendants are a prospective or potential danger to the community. And sometimes they fold in, the judges do, the words, the ongoing election denialism of former President Trump, the fire that infuses his base. So what he says moving forward could impact some of those defendants, their pretrial detention, potentially their trials moving forward.
Yeah, I think our audience could certainly be forgiven for not understanding all of these different investigations. So I'm glad you are following all of this for us. Nikole, I want to talk about a separate matter, but also related to the former president, of course, which is a federal appeals court saying that a House committee can access portions of Trump's tax returns. Why is the House Ways and Means Committee seeking these documents in the first place?
Well, basically, I mean, this goes back to the campaign, the 2016 campaign, where the former president at the time when he was running for office did not release his tax returns and quite frankly, never has. And so the committee has been seeking his returns from the period between 2015 and 2020, his time as president, to evaluate the efficacy of the presidential audit program. And so that was kind of the nature of their original request. And so while today's decision is a step forward for the committee in terms of potentially allowing them to proceed with this investigation, it's still going to require some more hurdles in the days and weeks ahead. I spoke with a committee aide not too long ago who said, basically at this point in time, the ball is kind of in the former president's court. And while certainly publicly we saw the speaker come out today, the chairman of House Ways and Means, Richard Neal, put out a statement saying, they hope to get these returns immediately. That may not necessarily happen because certainly the former president and his attorneys have the right to appeal this decision. And so if that were to happen, of course, this will continue to be litigated, which means it could take some more time before the committee is able to acquire these returns, if ever. Quite frankly, we know obviously time could potentially be running out. Certainly if control of Congress changes hands, if Republicans take control, then they likely would, stop an investigation like this. But, committee officials tell me that really doesn't matter. They just, they kind of set out with this investigation in mind. Then they just want to be able to follow through at some point. But again, this decision does allow them to kind of move that ball forward. But again, it'll be up to the former president and his team as to whether or not ultimately they will comply and release these, or if they're going to fight this further.
Yeah, years-long saga, indeed. Scott, going back to January 6th, the committee is actually, reportedly speaking with former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, but we also know that Pennsylvania Republican gubernatorial nominee Doug Mastriano spoke with the committee today, and I understand that was a short meeting. Why does the committee want to interview these two men?
Yeah, meanwhile, the committee keeps chugging along ahead of possible September committee hearings. Doug Mastriano, not only the Republican gubernatorial candidate, he was outside the Capitol January 6th, and according to the committee, had some contact about the fake electors plan. Mastriano's meeting here was short, cut off after a few minutes. He's just the latest defendant to have some disagreement with the committee about recording this session. Mike Pompeo speaking as well. The committee has a lot to ask of him.
Yeah, and Mastriano, a key person to watch, especially in that governor's race, because if he wins, he would appoint the Secretary of State who oversees elections. Nikole, Killion, and Scott MacFarlane, as always, thank you.